His only loss is the UFC champion Tito Ortiz. He's very dangerous with knees, elbows, and submissions. He was the first foreigner to win the Pancrase New Blood tournament. One of the things that still amazes me about Evan, for those of you that don't know this, he was introduced to the sport and learned it by tapes. He was self-taught. And now he trains with former UFC heavyweight champion Randy Couture. Good to see you back, Evan.
The first time I heard the name Evan Tanner, and one of my deputy coroners gave me a call and told me that we had a high-profile case in the works. And I had to get them to tell me who Evan Tanner was. We knew we had somebody out there that was lost, and we called out our De Anza Search and Rescue Unit. They're our volunteer organization to the Sheriff's Office because they are trained in the searches, and we will turn over the majority of the scene to them.
I received a call at 4 p.m. that we had a missing person in the Palo Verde area, and that this missing person was Evan Tanner. We began to almost immediately get phone calls from media wanting to know what was going on. Had you found him yet?
The feeling was, for us, it was a search and rescue, no matter if it was a celebrity or just a regular citizen. We pull out the same amount of stops for whoever we're looking for that's lost out in the desert.
The immediate call we got was just that was a gentleman by the name of Evan Tanner was reported missing. He had left his home in Oceanside on Wednesday, September the 3rd. He traveled to our desert, found him a campsite, and his idea was he was going to hike to a place called Clap Springs on Thursday the 4th. When he got to Clap Springs, there was no water at the springs. He was almost out of water, and he sent a text message to his friends at Clap Springs, almost out of water. We'll try and hike back to camp 5 miles south and east of Flat Top Mountains after sundown. If you don't hear from me by 8 a.m., call for help. Cell coverage isn't really good out there, but texting seems to be able to connect better than voice. When his friends didn't hear from him the next morning, on September the 5th, they contacted Oceanside Police Department at about approximately 9 a.m. From my understanding, Oceanside didn't understand where the location was, because it wasn't in their jurisdiction. So they passed it off to San Diego County, which is the proper thing to do. San Diego County didn't know where Clap Springs was. It took them a while to figure out that it wasn't in their county. Then they sent the call to Imperial County. Imperial County acted immediately, sending deputies out and also using CHP fixed-wing aircraft to fly the area. Both were unsuccessful. De Anza Rescue was called out at 4 p.m. I was first on scene. Initial thought was, as my team members came in, where to send them. What was the search plan? We didn't have a campsite to go from. All we knew was that he had sent this text message from Clap Springs. We had 2 teams in the field that night, with other teams arriving first light the next morning on Saturday. At approximately 10:30 that morning, Air 9 located Mr. Tanner's campsite. There was no sign that he had been there. All track that was there was old track. We did find that there was water containers there waiting for his return. So at that time, we sent a team from his campsite north to Clap Springs, while the teams in the field were heading south from Clap Springs to his campsite now, with the hopes that we would catch him in the middle somewhere. At approximately 12 noon on the 6th, we requested assistance from Marine Corps Air Station out of Yuma. They sent us Rescue 2, which is a rescue helicopter. They flew missions the rest of the afternoon to the point where our members finally located a foot track in a wash. Then it went into the rocks and the hills, and we lost track. And it was determined that due to the last contact with Mr. Tanner, it was no longer a search and rescue mission, it would be a recovery mission. And knowing that Mr. Tanner had left his base camp on Thursday, he had suffered 110 plus temperatures for 3 consecutive days. Knowing that he was almost out of water on Thursday at noon, knowing that he probably had no water on Friday and no water on Saturday, all probability Mr. Tanner's life had ceased to be. So we pulled our team out Saturday evening at 7 p.m. with the idea and the thought that we would go back on Sunday morning and begin to search again. As my team was searching a wash, one of my members spotted something up on the side of this mountain. It appeared to be red. Rescue 2 flew into the area and stated that it appeared to be a water container. I climbed up the side of the mountain and verified that it was a water container and that it matched what Mr. Tanner had at his base camp. We don't know if Mr. Tanner discarded the red water container or whether that it fell from his backpack. Now we knew which side of the mountain he was on. On Monday morning, September the 8th, I was notified shortly after 7:30 that the sheriff would like me to put a plan together for one last air ops. Rescue 2 launched from Yuma, Marine Corps Air Station, and ran a grid pattern, and at approximately 12 noon, Rescue 2 located Mr. Tanner's body. It was approximately 1.25 miles from his campsite. Our search area was in this general area here from Clap Springs south to his base camp, slightly to the east as the Flat Top Mountains created a natural boundary on the west. He retracked his track from Clap Springs down until it became apparent dehydration, disorientation had set in, and he basically succumbed in this area right here.
My name is Daryl Garber, and I'm a forensic pathologist, and I'm a licensed physician and surgeon in the state of California. I'm board certified by the American Board of Pathology in anatomic and clinical pathology. I'm also board certified in forensic pathology. To date, I've performed over 12,000 forensic autopsies, and I've testified in court over 500 times. We received Mr. Tanner's body in the advanced state of decomposition. And when I say that, basically, he was pretty much unrecognizable. There were changes that the body had already gone through of moderate to severe decomposition, where the body showed color changes in the skin. The skin was peeling off from his body. He had quite an extensive amount of bloating because of post-mortem gas formation, and he was actually quite infested with environmental insects.
After Mr. Tanner was located, we were able to take his GPS and download it. In that, it shows us his track, where he walked, where his GPS went. We know that he left his campsite at approximately 7:45. We know that he reached Clap Springs shortly after noon on September the 4th. We know that he left Clap Springs headed for his campsite at approximately 4:15 on September the 4th.
I think he thought there was water at Clapp Springs because of the name, for one thing. It's Clapp Springs. There's usually water in some place like that. It's a well, it's a spring. More research or talking to locals, he might have find out that it's normally dry.
We know that his track stopped shortly after midnight on September the 5th. With that being approximately 16 and a half hours, he probably was out of water before midnight when he laid down, possibly to rest.
Once he ran out of water, he would certainly become dehydrated. He would become thirsty. He would become tired. The heat exposure would certainly take its toll initially, mainly in the form of dehydration and probably tiredness. As things progressed over the hours, he would then develop electrolyte imbalance from losing his electrolytes, especially salt, out of his body. And as we know, normal body temperature taken orally is 98.6 degrees. The body temperature would start to go above that, and that would cause eventually organ failure. But before that, he would begin to experience an altered mental status. He may hallucinate. Your mind, quote unquote, plays tricks on you. You may think that something is there that's not actually there. You may be trying to reach it. And that's just part of the altered state of consciousness which you eventually reach before becoming comatose and dying.
In the final 5 hours of Mr. Tanner's life, his track log shows that he became very erratic in his direction of travel. He's climbing up to the top of a hill and then coming down, and then climbing up another hill and coming down, all within approximately a half a mile circle. He's panicked, he's scared, he's frightened. He doesn't know what to do. He can't find what he's looking for. It sounds very cruel and mean. At this point in a person's life, there's no recovery. They're basically a walking dead. Even if medical help could have airdropped into this man at that point in time, he wouldn't have made it. His organs, liver and kidneys, everything is gone.
Suffice to say, you think lips get chapped a little bit when you're out too long in the sun? It doesn't hold a candle to what happens when you're down here in the desert and you're out of water and you're dehydrated. You really start changing as you dehydrate. You can see it on somebody as they do.
I did actually see a picture that was on his own cell phone that he had apparently taken of himself. And at that point, it was actually quite sad because he had a real look of fear on his face that he was not going to make it back, that he just wasn't going to make it. And you could see the dehydration in his face. You could see the toll that the heat had taken on him. And there was just a real fear, look of fear on his face that he knew at that point that he wasn't going to make it back. And he took that picture so that there may be a last picture of him. So I really was touched by that because it was quite sad.
We didn't see anything on Evan at the scene, but in between his removal from the scene, transport, and the autopsy day, we started picking up on the web and things like that because we look everywhere the people look to find out what the talk is. There were things, one research that talked about his downward turn a while back where he was an alcoholic and maybe depressed and things of that nature. But there was nothing from anything that we read, looked at, or from his camp that would show any signs of anything like that. It was a man going out for a camping trip.
At the time that the post-mortem examination was performed, he did not have any residual blood in his body. It had already drained out. So the tissues that I tested for drugs and alcohol were his spleen and liver. And both in the spleen and liver, there was a level of alcohol found. However, the actual decomposition or putrefaction process will produce alcohol in the body. and the amount or levels that were found in his spleen and liver were consistent with decomposition rather than actually him drinking.
I reviewed his personal camera, reviewed his texts. You could tell that this was not an intentional act that he did. He did not commit suicide. He succumbed to the elements. You could watch him as he'd take a picture of himself, change from one picture to the other.
He did not have any evidence of being a severe alcoholic. There are changes that the body goes through that I can still see even with the amount of decomposition that was present on his body. I would still be able to determine if there was a large amount of fatty change or fatty liver disease associated with chronic drinking or cirrhosis, certainly. He did not have any of those changes. His heart was a normal looking heart, except of course for the state of decomposition that he had. So he did not have any changes that would be consistent or characteristic with being a chronic alcoholic.
Dr. Garber will take a lot of the information that we have gathered based on what he sees of the autopsy, what he has found during the autopsy, and based on that he provides us a cause. And for Evan Tanner, I believe it was environmental, and the deputy coroner report listed that death as an accidental.
For my research, Mr. Tanner had talked to individuals that talked about gold mines, the lost mines in our desert. He bought brand new GPS, top of the line. He bought water purification system. He bought brand new metal detectors to search for these lost treasures. He had books on gold mines. I think he was trying to explore the area, dig down deep into himself, and come back a stronger person. According to Mr. Tanner's GPS track log, he left Oceanside on Highway 78, traveling through Julian, coming into Westmoreland and Brawley, continuing east on 78 of Brawley, out of the agricultural fields into the desert, through the Glamis sand dunes, and continues east through the desert. At this location, Milpitas Wash parallels Milpitas Wash Road. At this point, he turns onto Milpitas Wash Road, goes down a couple of miles, and then turns into the desert off of a little side road. At that point, he sets up his base camp. Just to the north is Flat Top Mountains, which he climbs and trails through those on his way to Clap Springs at the Red Pin. Just to the east of the Red Pin and Clap Springs is Palo Verde at the Riverside Imperial County line.
His trip in 2008 to Imperial County, he chronicled it from his house in Oceanside, through the mountains, down through Julian, and came down into the desert. He would stop and take photos. Every once in a while, there were a couple of photos in through a side rearview mirror back at his face or off into the distance or something. He was doing what he wanted to do.
Was Evan on a spiritual journey? I think that was his intention. It's just a very tough place, and it's like a near-death experience, and that changes people. And maybe that's what he was looking for.
Never take for granted anything in life. Never underestimate the surroundings you're in, be it the city, the mountains, the desert. Once you do, that's when it comes to say hello to you.
When Mr. Tanner got to Clap Springs, he could physically see Palo Verde. The question is, why did he not call for help? Why did he not focus his attention towards Palo Verde? Why did he continue to try and go back to his campsite? Those are questions that bother all of us in our team, because we look at that would have saved his life. We look at that was the rescue. But what bothered me most of all was that his thought was the power of one. That was one thing that kept hitting me back and back forward, over and over and over and over, was the power of one. But unfortunately, the power of one, not relying upon anyone else, that was his fall. That was his fall from the pedestal. That was his fall from life without asking for help.